Please be seated. What thoughts come to your mind when you hear the word privilege? Do you see privilege through the lens of power? Or do you see privilege through the lens of opportunity? Curiosity took me to Webster's dictionary, where privilege is defined in these ways: special advantage, permission, the right held because of one's stature or rank, an exercise to the exclusion or detriment of another. Privilege is also the right or benefit granted to or enjoyed by an individual, class, or caste. During last week's sermon, Father Chuck took us through an exercise of taking a crumbled up paper ball, some of you may remember this, and challenging us to get it into a barrel located into the middle of the church without moving from our location. He reminded us that each of us was born into a specific position, a position we had no control over at the time of our birth. For this exercise, some of us had the privilege, a special advantage of being close to the barrel, an easy shot into the barrel. Some of us were further away. In order to get our ball into the barrel, we needed support from others. Remember, we could not move. And some of you showed insight in how to get your ball into the barrel by passing your ball to a neighbor who passed it to another neighbor, which enabled your ball finally to make it into the barrel. I spent the week reflecting on this exercise, and I've been thinking to myself, if we as a group could see this exercise as an exercise on inclusion or exclusion. Were we so focused on getting our ball into the barrel that we did not notice that we who sat in the sanctuary were excluded from the exercise because of our position? A position that meant we were too far away to participate. We had no one to pass the ball to, no real connection to the rest of the group. In some ways, we were invisible. And I think of how many of God's beloved children who, because of distance and their position in society, are invisible to us. In our gospel this morning, Jesus and his disciples have arrived in Capernaum. During their journey, the disciples had been arguing with one another on who was the greatest amongst the group. When they reached the house, Jesus sat them down and asked them, "What were you talking about?" Suddenly, a very uncomfortable silence came over them. The disciples were well aware of what they were talking about, a conversation on power, who among us is the greatest. His disciples were not seeing the bigger picture of what Jesus had been saying to them on their journey. Their only focus was on power and status. So Jesus, being Jesus, a known disruptor of the power structure, picks up a child who is nearby and places the child in the midst of his disciples. We can only imagine what the disciples were thinking. What in the world is Jesus doing, placing this child in front of us? We need to remember that in Roman society, children were viewed as socially inferior. They were the least valued in their communities. Children were vulnerable to the powers to be, often treated as slaves or outcasts. In other words, they were basically invisible. Their position in society placed them on the edge of that society. As Jesus holds the child in his arms, he says to his disciples and to us, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." Suddenly, one of the most vulnerable people in Roman society was made visible through the single act of raising up this child. By welcoming this child, one of his most vulnerable, Jesus was sending a clear and powerful message, not only to his disciples, but to us. He was reaffirming that every person, no matter what his or her status is in society, that person is a beloved child of God. Jesus is challenging us to bear witness to the gospel, to bear witness to justice and peace, and to seek out and to serve our neighbors. Jesus reminds us that discipleship is more than just providing for physical needs. Discipleship involves building relationships and partnerships and finding solutions to problems. It is standing up against human rights violations. It is educating ourselves on the issues that affect us locally, in our nation, and in our world community. It is using our voice against the power structures that allow human rights violations and the lack of respect for human dignity to occur. Violations that force our vulnerable neighbors, God's children, to live under conditions that deny freedom and justice, all in the name of power and privilege. Jesus expects us to use our privilege of opportunity to share our gifts that bring love and hope to our vulnerable neighbors, both near and far. And we did just that with our support of the New York Haiti Project. We committed ourselves in partnership with other parishes to support the people of Natal, Haiti. One of the goals has been to build a school which initially will be used for both the church and the school. And the great news, St. Luke's Episcopal Church and school were officially opened on September 9th. The school has enrolled 75 children in grades K through 5. And I quote from Sam Owens, coordinator for the New York Haiti Project, "Nearly every child in Haiti realizes that education is the best path out of poverty, and they take their studies very seriously." End of quote. Thank you for your investment in the Haitian community. Another way in which we can share our gifts of love and hope is through Episcopal Relief and Development. Our outreach committee has designated today as Episcopal Relief and Development Sunday, and we ask you to prayerfully consider supporting their work and ministry. Episcopal Relief and Development is the mission arm of the Episcopal Church. They recently brought a fresh new look to their logo, accompanied by their new tagline, "Working together for lasting change." Episcopal Relief and Development works in partnership with churches and dioceses. Their approach is asset-based community development, or if you like shorthand, ABCD. That means that Episcopal Relief and Development does not impose a one-size-fits-all approach. Their focus is on community strengths, its gifts, its resources, not on their needs, although that is considered, but the emphasis is on their strengths and what they can contribute to working through their needs. Three areas that Episcopal Relief is currently focused on are issues that are related to women, like violence against women, leadership. Another area is climate, and the other is children. Through the U.S. Disaster Program, Episcopal Relief is working with dioceses of East Carolina and North Carolina, along with the Episcopal Farm Worker Ministry, to provide emergency assistance to migrant and seasonal farm workers in rural areas affected by Hurricane Florence. And remember that a lot of this area was also hit by Hurricane Matthew last year, so a lot of the communities have gotten a double whammy. And Episcopal Relief is still there from Matthew, and they're there now for Florence. These workers, these farm workers and seasonal workers, are particularly vulnerable because they depend upon their employers for housing and transportation. Another area which I recently learned about was Episcopal Relief is working alongside Islamic Relief and the Anglican and Episcopal churches in Europe in supporting the work of a Holy Land Institute for the Deaf and the deaf-blind children located in the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan. This group works with children with disabilities. And under normal conditions, children with disabilities are excluded from society. And then having been forced to move to this refugee camp because of the Syrian war only compounds the challenges already facing these children. Episcopal Relief and Development helps us to extend our reach of God's love and hope into the mission fields of our wider church community. As baptized Christians, we are called to seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving our neighbors as ourselves, to strive for justice and peace among all persons, and to respect the dignity of every human being. Witnessing to the gospel is challenging. Witnessing to the gospel often takes us out of our comfort zone, especially when we go up against power and privilege that has been cemented together to create unjust living conditions. Willingness to speak out on issues of injustice takes courage. As a member of the Jesus movement of the Episcopal Church, let us use our real privilege, the privilege of opportunity, to share our gifts each day as we spread God's love and hope to the most vulnerable of God's beloved community. Let us pray. Holy Creator, we gather in your presence seeking your wisdom and grace. Open our eyes to all that surrounds us. Open our ears to your whispers, and open our hearts to your hurting world. Inspire us to walk in solidarity with all who are discouraged, lonely, hungry, or afraid. Grant us understanding as we strive to live your love in all places of our lives. Empower us, we pray, with nonviolent hearts, hopeful and compassionate spirits, that we may express a holy anger for the injustices in our world